earthquakes and famines. And then during the time of the Apostle Paul, there were 3 kings, 3 Caesars within the space of about 2 years. They would fight, and one Caesar would be killed, another would take his place, and that Caesar would last a short time, and another would take his place, and then finally Nero came to power, and he ruled for 13 years. But there were wars constantly for a good period of time. In fact, the reason that Vespasian left his son Titus at Jerusalem was to go back to Rome and become emperor. So it was a time of great turmoil in the Roman Empire, and this prophecy was fulfilled in the days of the apostles. Then will they deliver you up to tribulation and put you to death, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. Who asked the question? The apostles asked the question. He said they will kill you. Did they kill the apostles? They killed all of them except for John. And John disappeared from Ephesus in AD 101. But they killed all the others. They were martyred for Jesus Christ. Every one of them. And that fulfilled the promise that Jesus made to them. And the prophecy that Jesus made indicates that John himself will return at the end of the age. And the ascension of Isaiah said that he will be killed. So all of the apostles will be killed before Jesus returns. They will deliver you up to tribulation and put you to death, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. The apostles went into all the world just like he commanded them. There were apostles that went into India. There were apostles that went into Syria and Greece and over into Rome. The Apostle Peter is supposed to have gone to Rome. These things that happened to the apostles, I believe, are typical of the things that will happen at the end of the age, although they were specifically fulfilled in the apostles' day. I believe they were a type of what will happen. If you remember, Israel was a type. I call it leader of the fleet. They were the ones that God was using to picture things that would come, like in Galatians. Paul mentioned the Hagar and Sarai, that they were allegories of Jerusalem, which is above, and Jerusalem, which is below. Israel was like that. The things in the temple were like that. Their worship, their holy days, their priests were all allegories, types of things to come that shadowed Christianity, or that foretold future events. And so these things that happen here in verse 11 may very well be recapitulated. They may happen again at the end of the age. And this gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then will the end come. And I think this end of which he speaks here is the nation of Israel. What will be the sign when these things are to be fulfilled? When's the temple going to be destroyed? When the end comes. The end of Israel was when the Romans destroyed the city of Jerusalem. Now the funny thing about Matthew is that Matthew doesn't even go into detail regarding the destruction of Jerusalem. If you look at Luke chapter 21, Luke has several verses there where he talks about the armies that were surrounding the city. They were not to go into the city, they were to flee to the hills, and that it would be a time of distress. And they were not to be deceived by thinking that they would be able to get safety in Jerusalem. You know, Jerusalem was a very strong city, and that the Romans only had 50,000 men. And they could have, the Jews had twice that number in their army, or more. They outnumbered the Romans. And the Romans defeated them because God was fighting for the Romans. If you read Josephus' account of the Roman wars, you will find that there were occasions when the Romans Romans, when they besieged one city, they put their assault weapons upwind of the city, and there was a strong wind, like 40 or 50 miles an hour. What would that be? 100 kilometers per hour. That was blowing, and the Romans could launch their catapults and throw stones against the wall and into the city, and the engines of the Jews were going into the wind, and they would fall short. They couldn't reach the Roman engines, and God fought for them. Another occasion, when Josephus was taken prisoner, but the time the city fell, there was this dense fog that fell over the city, and it was so thick you couldn't see hardly anything, and the Romans sneaked into the city by night and killed the guards, and it took the city almost without firing a shot.